Hi everyone. This is another story from the most bizarre true crime stories ever told. This one is called the Miyazawa Murders. So on the street in the Setagaya neighborhood of Tokyo, Japan, it used to be a bustling area with more than 200 homes and businesses. By 2000, though, only 4 of those houses were occupied. The city was planning on using the space to expand Soshigaya Park and had already given most of the residents a large sum of money as a relocation bonus. 2 of the 4 remaining houses belonged to the same family. In one lived Miyazawa Mikiko, 44-year-old man, his wife, 41-year-old tutor Yasuko, and their 2 children, 8-year-old Nina and 6-year-old Rei. Right next door lived Yasuko's sister and her husband, and Yoshiko and his mother, Haruko. On December 30th, 2000, Nina spent the afternoon at her aunt and grandmother's home, watching a video on the computer. It was the last time they would see her alive. The Miyazawa family had a normal evening at home together. At some point, Rei was put to bed in the second-floor bedroom. Mikiko was working on the first floor, while Yoshiko and Nina cuddled up in front of the third-floor attic, possibly sleeping. The authorities believe that around 11:30 p.m., a man climbed up a tree to the second-floor bathroom, removed the screen from the window, and entered the home. The man first went to the next room, where 6-year-old Rei was sleeping. It seems the intruder paced around the room for a while, or perhaps kept returning to the room, as this is where police found the most footprints. The man strangled the young boy and set about murdering the rest of the family. Because there are no survivors, and it was such a hectic, bloody scene, the authorities cannot be sure exactly what happened next. The best guess is that the intruder went downstairs to where Mikiko was working. Mikio was either already on his way upstairs or confronted the man when he came down from the second floor. The intruder stabbed him with a sashimi knife he brought to the home. Mikio had stab wounds all over his body, and part of the knife blade was found in the back of his skull. It is then thought that the murderer went back upstairs and began attacking Yasuko and Nina in the attic, only to find that his knife was too broken to inflict the damage he intended. He probably went back downstairs to the kitchen to get another knife, seeing as the second murder weapon found in the home belonged to Miyazawa's own knife set. Miyazawa's. It is thought that while the murderer had temporarily left the 2 alone, Yasuko may have carried Nina down to the second floor and attempted to dress her wounds with the family's first aid kit. Nina's blood was found on the kit, as well in the attic, so this timeline lines up with the evidence. The murder came back upstairs to where the desperate mother was trying to save her daughter's life and brutally stabbed both Yasuko and Nina to death. The 2 were found crouched back to back. The next morning, Haruko called the home to speak to her daughter. There was no answer. She found this odd as it was only a Sunday, but also New Year's Eve, so the family should definitely have been home. She called several more times, never getting an answer. Feeling uneasy, she decided to go next door to check on them. Knocking at the door was also met with no answer. She remembers using her spare key to get into the home and finding the horrific scene that lay within. She saw Mikio first stabbed multiple times, laying on his own blood, by the foot of the stairs. Panicked, Haruko ran up the stairs in search of her daughter and grandchildren. On the second floor, her worst fears were confirmed. She found Yasuko and Nino stabbed and covered in blood in the hallway, and Rei laying lifeless in his bed. The police were called at 10:56 a.m. and one of the most bizarre investigations in the country's history began. The perpetrator had left behind heaps of evidence that should have immediately led to the identification and a speedy arrest. In the bathroom, they found a desk drawer from the first floor that had been dumped out into a full bathtub. Yasuko's belongings from her purse, as well as Mikio's wallet and keys, were also found in the tub. But that's not the strange part. After all, home invaders ransack houses all the time. The weird thing wasn't what he did with the Miyazawa's belongings, but what he left behind of his own. In the bathroom, the authorities found a blood-soaked towel and sanitary pads the murderer had used in an attempt to dress his own wounds. He had used the bathroom but hadn't flushed the toilet. His fingerprints were all over the home and on the murder weapons, which were both left on the second floor beside Yasuko and Nina's bodies. Police found 4 empty ice cream packets on which they found the killer's saliva. He had also left behind essentially an entire outfit: a bucket hat, a long-sleeve baseball-style shirt, a jacket, a scarf, and 2 handkerchiefs, a pair of shoes, gloves, and a belt bag. On the bag, they also found the perpetrator's hair. The authorities had this person's fingerprints, hair, saliva, blood, and even feces. Police assumed it would be an open and shut case once they ran everything through their databases. Japan has an extensive DNA database, as everyone who has ever committed a crime, and even those who have merely been suspected of a crime, are compelled to give a DNA sample to the government. With a crime as brutal as this one, police assumed the perpetrator must already be in the system, having committed or been suspected of a smaller crime in the past. People don't just suddenly start a life off of crime by murdering an entire family, including 2 young children, in their fairly secluded home. However, nothing came up in the database. 5 million people in Tokyo and the surrounding area had their fingerprints tested. 5 million people. And still nothing was a match. The blood was found to be a male type A, which was different from the Miyazawa's blood types, making the authorities sure it was the killer's. However, without a match to anyone in the system, knowing the blood type was next to useless. The authorities set about investigating every piece of clothing the perpetrator had left behind. They found that the hat was only sold from September 1999 to November 2000, the gloves from 1998 to 2000, and the jacket was a 2000 release from Uniqlo. Since the crimes happened at the end of 2000, these dates seem to suggest that the killer had bought everything near the date of the crime. Perhaps he bought them especially to leave behind at the scene, to throw police off his trail, and they didn't necessarily come directly from his closet. Because so many units of each of these items were sold in stores all across the country, their identification didn't help the investigation much. The scarf did seem to have a lot more wear and tear to it, suggesting it may have belonged to the killer for a time. Police found that the style of scarf was made of plaid wool, was popular with the young and college-age people at the time. It had also been given away as a promotion at many stores throughout the city. So, it was impossible to track down everyone who had ever owned one, although it did make the police suspect that the killer was on the younger side. The shirt, the belt bag, the handkerchiefs, and the shoes the perpetrator had left behind provided some more clues as to the killer's origins, but left investigators even more baffled than before. Around 300 of that same shirt had been purchased in all of Japan. However, it was only available in 4 stores in Tokyo, and only 10 had ever been sold from those 4 stores. The killer could have been one of just 10 people, but police weren't able to track them all down. The belt bag had adjustable straps that had been pulled tight, suggesting the killer had a slim build. Inside, police found sand in the lab, concluded had come from the southwest of the United States. Some sources say it came from a specific Air Force base, leading some to believe the killer had been in the military or been the child of a military family that was stationed in Japan at the time. One of the 2 handkerchiefs found in the bathroom had a deliberate slit in the middle of it, leading investigators to believe that the killer had used it to protect the handle of his knife. Police noted it was a technique used by Chinese fish factory workers to make sure their knives don't get wet and slippery as they gut the fish. Both handkerchiefs also smelled like Drakkar Noir cologne, which was apparently a scent popular with the skateboarders in the country in the 80s. Police found this interesting as the Miyazawa's home backed on a skate park, and witnesses said Mikio was often seen arguing with the skaters, who made a lot of noise and were generally disrespectful. Again, nothing came of that lead. The shoes became one of the most interesting pieces of the evidence. They were Schlesinger, a brand produced in South Korea and sold in both Korea and Japan. However, the size of this particular shoe was only sold in South Korea. Soil from the soles of the shoe was also traced to South Korea. The case remained unsolved and mystifying for years, till in 2005 a DNA expert was able to create a genetic profile for the killer. They found that the killer had East Asian roots on his father's side, Japanese, Chinese, or Korean, that his mother was of Eastern European descent, and his maternal grandparents were from the Mediterranean part of Eastern Europe. Some sources even narrowed it down to the countries bordering the Adriatic Sea, the Croatia, and or Albania. He also had a genetic marker that shows up in one of 13 Japanese people, 1 in 10 Chinese people, and 1 in 5 Koreans, making it even more likely that the killer hailed from South Korea. With the shoe evidence and the genetic marker leading the authorities to believe the man was Korean, they reached out to the country for help, but the government denied Japanese authorities access to their databases. Some believe police fumbled the case by not looking into various leads that popped up right after the murders. Suspects or suspicious people may have been overlooked because police were looking for a person with certain injuries, despite not knowing exactly where the killer's injury was. To be on his arms or his hands from the bloody blade slipping, but it could have been somewhere else. Even so, one woman said that on the night in question, a man with an injured hand darted out in front of her car near the neighborhood, and police never followed up that lead either. In an article on the anniversary of the crime, police encouraged that woman to reach out again and give an official statement. Over the years, more than 240,000 police officers have worked on this case, with some interesting and investigating it full time. The chief of police from the time of the crime has since retired but continues to investigate it unofficially. As of 2020, there have been 13,000 tips from the public, but nothing has ever moved investigators close to even naming a suspect.